Well, hello, and thank you for joining today's edition of the Signal Media webinar series, a survey of DevSecOps and continuous ATO in the government sector, delivered to you through the generous support of Security Compass. I'm Howard Wahlberg, correspondent for FC International's Signal Media. Governments face mounting challenges as they strive for delivery of services efficiencies while balancing compliance requirements at speed. A Security Compass survey of federal, state, and local governments on the topic of DevSecOps and Authority to Operate, otherwise known as ATO, shed light on the challenges, giving way to developing critical solutions. Today's panel discussion will uncover further insights, including navigating challenges at all levels of government, shifting security left, the need to evolve manual governance and controls tracking and automation, as well as ATO expectation of a risk-based approach to DevSecOps, all while maintaining speed and agility. During this webinar, you'll learn current and continuous DevSecOps and ATO challenges in the federal, state, and local governments, how these challenges are being addressed, and upcoming challenges in DevSecOps and ATO. Security Compass was founded in 2004 and began with a team of experienced penetration testers. Today, they work with many large enterprises globally to manage their cybersecurity risk through balanced development automation. They have three key offerings. Their flagship product, SD Elements, enables organizations to deliver software quickly and reduce cost through automation. Their modular role-based e-learning solutions empower organizations to embrace DevSecOps, and their strategic advisory services offer expertise in cloud security, pen testing, and red teaming for a better security posture. Joining me today to guide us during today's discussion will be Ihan Tek, VP of Information Security at Cyber Electra. Ihan is a seasoned information security professional specialized in risk management, security architecture, and application security domains with over 20 years experience. Ihan is active with ISACA, ISC2, IEEE, and other professional organizations, and provides cybersecurity events and trainings in North America. Ihan holds CISSP, CISM, TOGAF, SOA, ITIL, Oracle, IBM, and many other professional certifications. Altaz Villani, Director of Insights Research at Security Compass. He conducts ongoing research in the software security domain. Prior to joining Security Compass, he was a Senior Research Director and Executive Advisor at Infotech Research Group, providing trusted advice around application development, application rationalization, Agile, cloud, mobile, and the SDLC. Other past positions include Senior Manager at KPMG, and other positions working alongside senior stakeholders to drive business value through software development. Altaz is currently Vice Chair of the Open Group Security Forum, a member of the Safe Code Technical Leadership and CIO of Strategy Councils, and also sits on several IEEE working groups where DevSecOps and privacy challenges are being tabled at the international standards level. Hassan Yassar is the Technical Director of Continuous Deployment of Capability Group in the Software Engineering Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. Hassan leads an engineering group to enable, accelerate, and assure transformation at the speed of relevance by leveraging DevSecOps, Agile, Lean AI ML, and other emerging technologies to create a smart software platform and pipeline. Hassan has more than 25 years of experience as a senior security engineer, software architect, and manager in all phases of secure software development and the information modeling processes. He is also the adjunct faculty member in CMU's Hines College and Institute of Software Research, where he currently teaches software and security and DevOps engineering for deployment and operations. As always, please feel free to submit questions at any time during this discussion by using the Ask a Question box on your webinar console. We're going to have plenty of time for your questions throughout the discussion and also after the panel discussion. Please also note that we have resources available for you to download at your convenience. You can find them in the Resources tab on your screen. With that, I will turn it over to our very accomplished panel, Altaz Villani, who will open our discussion on continuous ATO. Altaz, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you, Howard. Appreciate it. So when we talk about the survey itself, really what we first want to highlight, who did we go after in this survey when we talk about the federal space. So within the survey itself, this gives you an idea of the roles. So we asked them specifically to describe the level of seniority that best matches their role. And we found that there were folks from the C-suite and a lot of folks who were managers, senior managers, directors, senior directors. And there were also some individual contributors. When we also asked them to rate their individual level of expertise on secure coding standards and regulations, we found that about 40% said excellent, with about 32% saying good and 30% saying average. So we've got a lot of representation from people in various roles who have well over, like close to 70% had excellent or good expertise in secure coding standards and regulations. And this is really the group that we wanted to go after, so that we could probe a little bit deeper and find out what is it that you're looking at. Help us understand as an industry where some of the challenges lie. In terms of the roles and positions, we asked what role best describes your function. And so we found that there were folks from IT infrastructure, sort of back office, corporate, which is not surprising. But we also found that there were folks who were in software development and a lot of DevOps. So that will come up as a recurring theme as we go through this presentation. And then we also had folks in the cyber and information security space, followed by compliance and acquisition and purchasing. And then when we asked them what focus most closely aligns with your position, most of them were in the program project management space. So it's really on the execution of the strategy. We did have folks, about a fifth were developers and engineers, and then we had security practitioners and acquisitions. So keep this in mind as we go through the data today. We've got folks from a broad range of seniority. We've got people that are across a number of different domains within their roles and really focused on implementation of strategy.
I would like to chime in if you give me a minute.
Yeah.
And that's really actually for the seniority level, that makes me think a good direction that we are heading, because especially senior level people are aware of the secure coding standards and regulations. And usually, if you remember, like years ago, maybe a couple of years, not a long time ago, we were always struggling the disconnect between seniority level with engineering perspective. I'm glad that the number is changing. So somehow we have a good understanding of the security aspect in the seniority level, and also the program management level as well, because there is usually a disconnect in between. And let's such that developers are doing their job or the security architect, they are doing job, but they are kind of struggling to justify a need of the necessity of the security aspect into the life cycle or the secure coding. Now I see it's kind of flipping. It's a really good sign for me. I will take that as we are heading the right direction. How much we are implementing, it's a different thing we will discuss, but I like that numbers, and that's kind of like hopeful for the future.
Yeah. It looks like we're starting to gain that alignment from a senior leadership standpoint and the actual program management side of things. Yeah, which was problematic in the past. So let's take a look at our findings and the overview. And by the way, please, as Howard mentioned at the start, feel free if you've got any questions that you want to ask us. Let's make this interactive. We're just part of the same community, trying to help each other out here. So we asked the question: does your agency develop custom software? So the vast majority of them said yes. Now we have split this up by local, state, and federal agencies. But overall, about 2/3 roughly said that yes, they develop custom software, and a little over a third said that they don't. So, probably this is some kind of off-the-shelf that they would take that's prepackaged, cloud-based solutions, things like that. So when we look at the vast majority of the respondents saying that they do in fact develop custom software, let me start with you, Ayhan. Has this confirmed your experience when you're dealing with the federal space in general? Like there's a lot of customization of software involved?
Absolutely. Due to the nature of the kind of just the industry, and I'm a bit kind of just puzzled as well. I was expecting a bit more, but more and more kind of just the government agencies are kind of just developing custom software over there. Right? My experience is kind of just the numbers are more than these.
Hassan, your thoughts?
I completely agree with Ayhan. Numbers should be more than that. And other things maybe we can focus on. We may not developing any new capabilities, but we always configure the solution to meet our needs. Like think about example of the Microsoft product as example. Still, we have to do some sort of customization for our needs. Still, for me, it's a kind of a custom software we do. And then we are changing, and in the deployment perspective, maybe some configuration, each of them has a secret element in it. I think we have to look at everything we are acquiring or working. There is a configuration, there is a security component in it.
Mm-hmm. And this is going to be important. Yeah, go ahead,
right,
please.
There are a lot of important things, like if we are not looking for that perspective, we miss the security configuration. We have to look at everything software right now. And there are some sort of configurations, either manually, which I don't think there's a lot of manual configuration, more about automated, like scriptings or the deploying to the large scale or using it in the cloud environment. There is a configuration element on it, 100%.
Yeah.
If there's a configuration element, there's a software in it. If there's a software, there's a security problem. We cannot get away of it. So we have to think about that bigger perspective. I think it's more than that, and I agree with Ayhan.
Yeah, interesting. Let's take a look at this. So we asked as well, so tell us about the software development methodology. And so, by a large margin, we've got DevOps and DevSecOps. I mean, we've seen stuff in the DoD, we've seen the Air Force put stuff out. There are a number of different frameworks. There are reference architectures that have been put out. So, DevOps, Agile, it really seems to be by far the majority in terms of the methodology in software development today. Hassan, just carrying over with what you just spoke about, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, first of all, calling it DevOps and DevSecOps, it is more about the set of practices. We may not say it's Scrum or Agile because you cannot really achieve Agile without having a DevOps implementations. So maybe DevOps is just a vehicle we can use. So when I look at that numbers, it looks like we have more than 50% of people are doing more Agile-ish type of software development methodologies. And other things, it's a little bit open up the topic. And some organization, they may have a different understanding of DevOps and DevSecOps. They may be doing only dev and hold, which I heard many examples. If we're not able to carry out the capability that we are building that goes into the operational, that's a DevOps actually. If we're not adding into anything in the operational metrics or measurement, we're not really doing DevOps, first of all. So I think that we have to look at the overall life cycle. Same thing for through Agile and a Scrum Agile perspective as well. Because if we are not including end-to-end life cycle, then probably we can fail. So overall numbers, it's optimistic. But again, I don't want to go in that trap. Yes, we are doing DevOps, but we don't know we are doing DevOps in situation. We have to be very careful. So number is great. I'm hoping that people are actually doing the DevOps, including operation, not the dev and hold example.
Ayhan, your thoughts?
Totally agree. And the thing is, we are going to see these numbers kind of going up more in the coming years, right? As part of the kind of just the industry, the government industry over there, one thing that I would like to kind of just emphasize is DevOps. It is a true DevOps that Hassan mentioned, right? It is great, these numbers. But unfortunately, this is my experience. What I see is in the kind of just a waterfall or the other kind of just the methodologies, right? There is a kind of just a well-established, the gates. It's my experience again into the government agencies, right? They are kind of just putting the DevOps as an excuse, saying that, hey, we cannot do X, Y, Z because we are doing Agile. We are doing the kind of just the DevOps. If it is not the case here, I like the numbers. And again, this is going to go up in the coming years.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that in the past, if I look back 5, 6, 7 years, we were just beginning the journey on an sort of with Agile, and Scrum was the predominant way of kind of doing software development. And I think as we started to go beyond the development space and started to intersect with what operations teams were doing, then suddenly, the need for DevOps became prominent. And now when we sort of take a look at DevOps, we started to fulfill that mandate. And then now we've got DevSecOps. So we start to inject more requirements, which will come up later in some slides. But I think it's, to me, when I look at this, it really is indicative of kind of a maturity that's been happening over time, at least at a minimum, some realization that we do need to move in that way, which is a little bit more agile.
Just going to add one more thing here, Altaz.
Yeah.
And then if you look at actually, I'm hoping it's a true number. If that's a true number, we should see a better time to operate. We have a further slide we will discuss.
Mm-hmm.
And if we are implementing a good practice on DevOps and Agile practices, we should have much frequent release or much quicker approval for ATO. That's kind of a true DevOps that we are talking about. If you're not able to have an ATO less than a day, maybe less than a week, something is not working right, seems to me. So we have to look at what is not right, and maybe look at our definition of our maturity level with DevSecOps. And having it just the CI/CD, it's not enough. And I heard so many examples, people are saying, yeah, we did DevOps because we did the continuous integration, continuous delivery. That's not the DevOps, honestly. We'll discuss more, but I'm just opening up a quick note here.
Yeah. Keep it in the back of our minds. Absolutely. So when we talk about speed here, right, do you currently measure the speed with which your team produces software? So we asked them this question, and most of them came back and said, we do. And we even have focused metrics or tools to help us measure the speed. And then we've got some that say we do, but it's somewhat indirect, about a fifth, roughly, quarter to a fifth. Then we've got the rest of them saying that we don't, or we're not sure. Anything here? Any insights? Any surprises? Hassan?
Yeah, actually, it's good to see that number. I'm not surprised. Again, that goes back to what things we are measuring. Yes, we can measure the speed, but speed, are we measuring at speed to the deployment? Are we measuring the speed to delivery? Are we measuring the speed to code checking? Again, it depends on organization. Having a metric is good to start because we should start from somewhere else.
Yeah,
we can measure how we are doing well, but the speed is kind of a relevant term. Mm-hmm. And then there's another analogy, we have been using it for a while, like we should really measure our build and then to patch, and also we can look at delivery. We may not do continuous deployment because it depends on organizations. Not every deployment goes. At least we can measure our speed with respect to and how much we're able to patch our vulnerabilities, as an example, and how much we are able to find out, remediate those vulnerabilities, like MTTR. MT is an example. Again, good numbers, but I think we have to look at a little bit deeper to see what that means for the speed.
Yeah. It's interesting that speed is a variable that is being measured, and there are certainly sub sort of categories of what speed entails to help kind of move us forward with this. But I'm sort of intrigued by the fact that we are trying to deploy, and the ability to go in there, deploy, come back, fix, deploy, come back, fix, coupled with the slide that we saw previously. I think this is an interesting trend if we project outwards, right, in terms of moving from Agile to DevOps, and now focusing and taking a look at speed as well. Ayhan, do you have some thoughts on this as well?
First of all, if you cannot measure something, you cannot kind of just manage that. It's very good that organizations are trying to kind of get the metrics over there. It's a very good thing. But again, we need to be careful on which metrics that we are collecting, right? For example, speed. Speed is irrelevant. I mean, if you are going into the wrong direction. For example, if you are kind of just, making the Agile fragile or DevOps DevOps, right? Then what is the point of kind of just measuring that speed? Again, it needs to be kind of just, balanced over there. But this is good to see that we are kind of just getting those, kind of just measurement systems in the organizations. That's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think why don't we kind of throw up that first poll and see what folks have to say about this? when we talk about shifting security to the left and introducing security early, I think, it'll be interesting to see what folks come back with. I'd like to, talk about that. And while they're actually filling out that particular poll, let us go and start to talk about this whole idea of shifting security left. And we asked them, to what degree is shifting security left in the software development process a priority? Do you want to shift to the left? Is this important for you? And so we got actually that, for roughly about a quarter said that this is in fact our top priority. And others said it was one of our top 3 priorities, all the way down to even one of our top 10 priorities. So I would say most of them that responded to this question said, yes, we are in fact looking at shifting security left in software development a priority within our organization. Now this is interesting if we correlate it with what we had previously around the fact that we've got custom software that's happening, custom software development, and we've got DevOps practices that are kicking in. And this falls in line with that to say that, yes, we're also taking a look at kind of shifting security left, but that's not always the case when we talk about DevOps, right? So Ayhan, your thoughts?
If you do not kind of just to shift the security left, it is impossible to kind of just to execute to the DevOps over there, right? Mm-hmm. Security is everyone's business over there, right? Mm-hmm. And if you don't empower the kind of just all the SDLC practitioners, right, and which we call it kind of just shifting to the security left, then again, you'll not be able to achieve the true DevOps or through kind of just the agile practices over there. So I do believe that these are the kind of just the numbers that we are going to see this one again. More and more kind of organizations are kind of just adapting to the shifting security to the left kind of just the mentality.
Hassan, your thoughts?
First of all, I really like to see the shifting security to the left should be the higher priority. And that even though 32% in the federal space and overall 30% it seems should be highest. That's kind of like good to see that kind of mindset changes, but we should see more of them because that's really important. And how about we achieve the shifting security to the left? That we can talk about DevSecOps and DevOps maturity in another agile perspective. Another interesting note here, like it's kind of a little bit surprising to me, and I see a difference between federal agency and state agency. I was hoping that they should be following the similar mindset. Because when you look at approval perspective, ATO perspective, and both are same regulations most of the time. Mm-hmm. Interesting to see that the both organization, I know like should be kind of hand in hand, should be the same number I was expecting. It looks like state agencies are not paying enough attention for security, seems to me. Even though what we believe, but priority-wise, I was a little bit surprised here.
Interesting. So we've got a few questions that have already started to come in. Thank you to the folks that have started to put these questions in. Some of these are contextual, and we may or may not be able to answer these. But one of them is any examples of what the Navy or the Army is doing? I understand the Air Force is publicly promoting Iron Bank and such. What have you seen in other federal organizations? Hassan, you want to field this one?
So a couple things, like we don't have a general data sets for Army specific and Navy, but I can tell you Navy and one of the first implementer of the DevSecOps concept. And some of the Army division, they have done it all at the past. And a couple examples, they were doing it. In overall organization, it's hard to judge, but there's a good component, or the groups are doing very well on improving their security practices and having an ATO perspective. I know the few folks from Navy side, they were the first DevSecOps implementer in the DoD, which they have done it and they presented. There are a couple of examples in Navy. And again, Air Force are using more about Iron Bank concept, more platform one, but before that, there's work has been done previously.
Yeah. And we have another question here. What is the general comprehension of the SEC in DevSecOps as it pertains to the maintenance and upkeep of secure coding training? I ask as I work with a secure coding training platform, and again, generally, there are vast discrepancies amongst clients' strength in the capacity building aspect of the whole process. So from a training perspective, right? What's the general comprehension of the security aspects of DevSecOps when we get to maintenance and upkeep? Any thoughts on that?
I can chime here. I know I don't want to interrupt Alahan, but for the security training, first of all, when we say that security means in DevSecOps, we are not putting a security in between Dev and Ops. We are looking for to cover up security in the lifecycle perspective. That's actually what the shifting security left concept means.
Mm-hmm.
We have to look at overall lifecycle, because if you miss a reasoning about the security, why we are doing it, what is the risk element that we are tackling, what the controls are, without knowing that planning perspective, we cannot really put the balance of the static analysis, dynamic analysis, and lifecycle perspective. So we have to think about, first of all, lifecycle thinking. Why you are putting a second between, just the terminology for me, we have to think about the concept in overall lifecycle. For secure coding training, yes, we should have a secure coding training for a developer perspective, but we have to pick the right secure coding training. We don't want to get the people trained the sake of training and learning the buffer overflow if they're not using anything in their code perspective. It has to be more specific to the language people are using it. Let's say, like, if I'm using a Java code, I should learn how I'm doing well in Java with respect to security. Yes, we may know the OWASP top 10, but should be very specific to the language that developers are using it. And we should measure that training based on the static analysis finding. That's going to be effectiveness of the training, then see that number should go down, like vulnerabilities in the static analysis and any type of static analysis tool should go down as an example as a result of the training.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Ayhan, do you have thoughts on this? Training
Yeah.
and security in DevSecOps?
Yeah, the security is a cross-cutting concern on the dev and ops side. I mean, we cannot say that, okay, let's kind of just do security operations and we are doing the DevSecOps over there, or only kind of just to, provide the training to the developers, secure coding the development trainings. It's not the kind of just the true DevSecOps over there. As Hassan mentioned, I mean, security is the shifting to the whole point of shifting to the left. It's everyone's business security, right? So you need to kind of just start from at the very, very kind of just the early stages instead of kind of just putting the security at the very end. You have to kind of just introduce that into each individual SDLC lifecycle or DevOps kind of just phases over there, right? That starts with kind of just your user stories if you are doing the DevOps Agile, and kind of just go to the threat modeling, and also the kind of just the security requirements, and then comes kind of just to the secure design and architecture first, and then goes kind of just to the secure development, then testing, security testing, and then comes the kind of just the deployment over there. So security is everywhere, right? So I wouldn't kind of just put this one onto the ops versus the kind of just the dev side over there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think this is a really valid question when we look at the different levels of maturity, and jumping right in sometimes to just say, here's what you need to do, use this crypto library, for example, and you may have a development team that may not be that mature. Rather than jumping into something like that, start with just educating them to say what could go wrong. So let's start with misuse cases. You're used to use cases, try misuse cases, and gradually get them to kind of start thinking about security. And as this evolves, try and get more people involved to go in and now start to say who from the development team would like to start to handle security. And so you see the emergence of a security champions program, and you gradually kind of build this as you go along. Right, and I think this is something I know. For example, SafeCode has put out some material on how do you build out a security champions program, but you basically emerge this over time. Trying to push something when a team is not necessarily ready in terms of a cross-cutting concern, it is everybody's responsibility. And the hope is you want to get to a point where your ops team has some understanding for what development goes through, and development has some empathy for what the ops teams are going through. And this is what builds that natural kind of DevOps culture that we're striving for. Now, we did put the results of the poll as well that folks took. And, when we look at this whole idea of shifting security left, so it looks like about 20%, 21% of the folks said that it was, in fact, the top priority. About 47, almost half, said that it was in the top 3. So I think it confirms a lot of the data that we saw as well. The idea of trying to bring security in earlier, trying to inject it into the design, and trying to do this is not something that happens overnight. It gradually starts to build in. And so we're seeing many of these trajectories all converging towards trying to manage continuous ATO. And we'll get to some of those slides. We have a pending question on ATO, but I'm holding that for a moment until we get to the relevant slide, and then we'll kind of bring that up. So when we said, we asked them, how important of a priority is increasing the speed at which your team now onboards, develops, and deploys your applications in the organization, right? So this idea of, can we shrink the time it takes to sort of onboard and do development and then deployment? So it's really more on the pre-ops side of things. How important is that, first of all, if we can kind of consider that? And it was interesting. We found that, once again, it was a top priority all the way down to one of the top 3 and one of the top 10. So there's a lot of emphasis and a lot of focus on taking a look at how we go in and how we develop our applications in a way that is consistent with the principles of DevSecOps. And I think this is confirmed with some of the RefArch work that has been put out by, for example, the Air Force. Hassan, you want to talk a little bit about this? I know you've been involved with some activities, but in terms of the rapid nature of developing and deploying applications in a continuous delivery model seems to be important. Have you seen this as well?
Yes, I saw that. Actually, I know we can talk about ATO later on, and continuous ATO, there are 3 elements: platform, team, and process perspective. When we look at the team perspective, it is very, very important to get a skill set person put into the life cycle so you can use that. So we may build up a great DevSecOps environment, we may build up a great software pipeline, but end of the day, we are dealing with the team members. Team members should be up to date. Team members should be knowledgeable enough to improve the security perspective. They can go fast, they can work in the application context, they can develop and deploy application much faster. So I saw the similar things. It's very, very important and team perspective, because if you don't have a right skill set person, and then machine cannot do a lot for us. Machine tell us what the problem it is, which is machine is actually the CI or the software. End of the day, human is going to fix the problem. Human will design the system. We are not there yet. You may say robot will do something code for us, but we're not there yet. So we are dependent on the team. And then since we are talking with the team, it's really important to get on board and learn them what we are doing. So DevOps will help, but end of the day, they have to understand about the security controls that we are dealing. They have to understand what the domain that we are in. They have to understand what the risk factors are. It's really challenging topics that we're going to talk a lot on risk possibly, but without knowing that information, it will delay the process.
Yeah.
Another things, I have been teaching software security courses almost 7-8 years at the CMU, and I see in my students, an undergrad level, they don't know enough about the security. They're not ready yet. So now think about getting an engineering workforce, but they don't have enough knowledge on security. So now you don't have enough time to invest those people. I think as a community, we had to work all together, build up that knowledge to make sure that so we can meet that needs.
Yeah, it's interesting. You touched on an area that I was going to ping Ayhan on, which is this whole idea of risk, right? We talk a lot about onboarding applications, deploying applications, but when you talk about, federal systems, local, state systems, like there's an idea of risk, there are compliance issues and requirements, and yet we're trying to increase the speed at which we try to develop and deploy these applications. I mean, Ayhan, your thoughts on this?
Right. The speed, I mean, if you don't run, you're going to stay behind, right? So it's not a surprise to see this kind of just the priority. Speed is a priority. It has always been, right? But as you mentioned, I mean, if you don't balance this with the kind of just the risk, as we mentioned earlier, you're going to make your kind of just, software development methodology, it's kind of just broken, right? As we kind of just put this, Agile is going to be fragile, DevOps is going to be DevOps, right? So you need to kind of just do a balance over there, right? You need to kind of just take into consideration of the risk and compliance kind of just the areas as well. so that you can kind of just not only produce into the fast delivery, but also secure delivery as well. And there's a fine just sort of balance on this that we can spend hours.
I agree. So let's talk about compliance for a moment then, right? So we asked them, please indicate how strongly you agree or disagree with this following statement. My organization regularly keeps up with new compliance standards and practices, right? Overwhelmingly, strongly agree or agrees the response we got back. So this whole idea of new compliance standards, practices, right? So we've got a lot of these things. NIST puts out some great material. We've got, other agencies putting things out. So the idea of being both compliant and at the same time ensuring that we're following good practices when it comes to secure software development is in fact really important. Hassan, I mean, you're squarely in this space. Like, any surprises? What do you think of this data?
I'm not that surprised because we are talking with agencies. They have to comply. They have to have some sort of comply with the risk management framework, with the risk perspective. They may have other compliance as well. I'm not surprised. They have to, but the question is, how are they achieving the compliance in their life cycle? That's actually, we have to focus on that one. Because they have to, because I don't see they will be out of. I was expecting actually more number a little bit here instead of having a strong agree. They should have more 70% strongly agree, because that's how we are operating, and based on the compliances and actually based on the risk component as well, because it's all hand in hand together. We cannot really separate out the risk and compliances. It should be all together. That number should be much higher, so it should be more than. So I'm not surprised. I was expecting more actually.
Interesting. So if we look at the length of time, now we're gradually starting to get into the ATO side, but let's pause for a moment. The length of time on each release spent just tracking these controls, right? So we asked them, and so it really comes down to anywhere from less than a day all the way up to 3 to 4 days, and this is on a per release basis, right? For each release, how much time do you spend on each release tracking these implemented controls and generating the artifacts to demonstrate to the AO that you have, in fact, met the cybersecurity standards? Now, we're talking about DevOps, so there's a lot of rapid deployments happening, and with each release, we need to go in and we've got to track and verify that we are, in fact, doing the right things. So we've got all the way from 3 to 4 days, per release. That adds up very quickly. Even 1 to 2 days could add up pretty quickly. If we kind of look at the pipeline, Ayhan, I'd like to ask you for your thoughts when we talk about making sure we've got the correct documentation for the authorizing officials to ensure that we've met these cybersecurity standards. What are your thoughts about this data that we're sort of seeing here?
Right. From the assessment perspective or certification perspective, if you're not automating the things over there, right, this is going to be bottleneck that you're creating, right? As you mentioned, I mean, these kind of just the release tracking controls, if it is taking kind of just that amount, and if you think about the DevOps, kind of just the IDAs go to the production as frequent as possible, right? And if you're telling them that they gotta wait so that you can do your kind of just the assessment or certification or control checking, right? Then they are looking at you as if you're coming from another planet over here, right? And you may get some kind of confidence that you may like it, right? So it's not a surprising thing, because even in the government, those kind of just the control checks are not automated yet. But there's a trend that I think we are going to discuss how these issues can be kind of just rectified. There's a trend over there that most of the organizations, maybe not governments, but other organizations are trying to automate these things as well.
Yeah, so it's interesting. There's an interplay here between industry and what's happening inside the government space as well, and it kind of feeds off each other. Hassan, you got thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'll test. And also, I'm going to go back to our original thought as well. We said if we are doing a good DevSecOps and DevOps, and I was expecting much quicker on the tracking controls. I think the next slide, we're going to talk about what are the problems. Like, still people are not using automated fashions, which is are telling us, yes, Our mindset
There we
is
go.
great. Exactly. That's what I was looking for that slide. When we try to track those controls, we are doing manually. So now, how can we expect that we can go faster and automate it? Still, we are doing manually Excel file or spreadsheets for our controls.
Yeah.
So, like, yes, we would like to go fast. We are building so fast. We are using continuous integration concept on every build. You may have a 2-week sprint. When it comes to the approval process, when it comes to some specific controls, we are kind of dropping and going back to our legacy thinking, legacy way of using the control management, go back to the manually. That's not practical way to solve that. I mean, kind of conflicting with the DevSecOps concept again. If we are doing end-to-end life cycle, we should start to think about automating these controls and track those how it is done. So kind of we are doing something that's limited to the CI. Why we're not doing into the control? Because it is going to be difficult. That would delay the approval process. Think about practical perspective. And then if you look at the NIST 800-53, there are more than 1,500 controls in it. Mm-hmm. And then when we look at the controls, it is not limited to the software only. There's other controls we should be aware of it. So now we talk about a systems level, especially in the federal and DoD domain. The ATO is not always the software that we are building. It's a combination of the systems in a hardware and a software and a system level as well. So assessors has to look at that perspective. So now it's getting a little bit difficult and it will be very challenging if we are trying to go back to the manual way to configure that or control it will be a problematic. So that's really telling the true story for me. Still, we are struggling. Still, we are not able to take an advantage of it. Yes, we are doing DevOps and Agile, but we are not doing other side of the work as DevOps mindset.
Yeah, so we have to think about this as a value stream, in essence, or a value chain, right? Every activity that we do en route to DevOps, DevSecOps, really should be contributing towards that mandate. But we're struggling a little bit here. Ayhan, your thoughts on this?
Absolutely, as Hassan mentioned, I mean, right? If you are kind of just not leveraging the automation over there, right? You are becoming a bottleneck over there, alphas, right? Is that kind of just obvious?
Yeah, and it's interesting. You know, we have processes in place, legacy processes, legacy systems, and part of this DevOps, DevSecOps transformation implies that we are going to try to look for ways to automate. You know, how do we go in and get these controls mapped to our architectures? And if you take a look at the work, for example, that's been put out, I know with the Air Force, there's some, you know, layered compliance approaches that are emerging out of this. So again, these are not easy problems to consider, but there is work being done, and there has been a good amount of effort, both from within the government as well as outside in sort of the commercial space, to try to help address what this problem is. And you know, from my perspective, I'm starting to see the emergence of this compliance fabric. So we don't have any single tool that can really do all of the things we're talking about: compliance with architecture, with secure coding, and everything kind of weave together. But if we stitch them, you know, piece by piece and integrate these different systems, just as we've got, you know, in any fabric, we stitch together pieces of thread. If we look at these different systems and stitch them together, we have the ability now to extract out meaningful data from a compliance perspective. So it touches on risk. What's the risk threshold? And we take a look at the testing. What were the test results? What were the code scan results? And all of this now begins to come out. And this is, in fact, where we are today in terms of the questions that are being answered and the tools, the systems, the processes that are emerging. And it's specifically aimed at addressing where some of these bottlenecks lie. Let me kind of take it one step further. Actually, before I talk about this slide, there was that question that came up, which we had deferred, which was around what is the expected timeline for ATO with DevSecOps environment. So we had a slide on that. I hope that gives you a sense of the timelines across different agencies within the government, or different levels of government, I should say. So if not, please feel free, ask the question again, and we'll try and bring it up as well. But I'd like to talk now about security inheritance. When we look at security and trying to accelerate secure development, secure systems, secure applications, there's this idea of inheriting security from components that have been, for example, pre-approved. So we asked the question, how do you primarily track this inherited security from your systems and from your infrastructure as part of your compliance process? And again, when we look at it, most of it is being done using Excel. And then next to that are some internal tools that have been kind of put together, whether custom made or a combination of tools thereof, that help us now to understand from a compliance process standpoint, what security do we inherit from all the other systems as we develop these new systems that we're kind of looking at. Hassan, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Altes. So actually, it goes back to the previous discussion as well, and it's kind of complementing each other. Still, we are using the legacy of way of thinking, another tool perspective. So we should really look at overall life cycle again. And if you're looking for this shift-left security or DevSecOps and Agile, DevSecOps environment should tell us to keep track all these changes as part of our daily routines. If we are deviating from the daily routines in our environment, it's going to become a bottleneck for us. So having an Excel document tracking why we're doing that, if you use the common repository as an example for entire security components, we can keep track directly from the pipeline. So it is there. It's already available in the community. We're using it, but the mindset is not there yet, seems to me. Having a complete separation in the same repository, we use the repositories every time. Can we put some information for entire security controls in the repositories we can use over and over and again? Or can we separate out some of the core modules, keep in the repos, and then separate those? These are the core modules we have done already. Use that component for the next project possibly, which we can. So it's going to give us two perspectives, Altes. One is we can control and track it. At the same time, we will be ready for any outage, any incidents. So we can monitor a core component of the system that we build it. Then we can see how things are changing. We can evolve it. We can let's use it. So successful organizations are able to separate those, put in the same repositories, and then people can use it and over again. So again, the bottleneck between seems to me, and how are we tracking from Excel is it's kind of complementing what we saw in the previous question as well.
Yeah. So here we are trying to produce information for the AO to go in and to prove that we're basically adhering to certain cybersecurity principles, and so we even talk about accelerating the process in terms of inheriting from supporting systems and infrastructure, but the very nature of how we track that inheritance is still even being done manually. So it's interesting. We've got a couple of different areas where we still have some bottlenecks that kind of need to be addressed. And then we sort of asked, what are the current approaches to achieving ATO? Are you doing continuous ATO? Are you doing kind of a fast track ATO or some kind of standard ATO process? And we saw that this is kind of what we see between the federal, state, and local agencies. So it's interesting that continuous ATO from a federal and state perspective, they responded that that's kind of what they do. But for the local agencies, it seems to be more with the standard ATO processes. So there seems to be some difference between the federal, state, and the local agencies. Either of you have any thoughts or comments about this?
Yeah, I mean,
right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Thank you. From the previous slide, right, I didn't know that the Excel spreadsheets can be integrated into the CI/CD pipelines over there, right? Because many kind of just, the agencies are using the Excel spreadsheets for kind of tracking those security risk items. And yet I see here kind of just, 33% of the kind of just the agencies are kind of just achieving the continuous ATO, right? There's a contradiction here. In order to kind of just get to the true continuous ATO over there, right, you need to kind of just fully leverage the kind of just the security in all and every aspect, right? Otherwise, as I mentioned, I mean, it's a kind of just subjective results here that is kind of contradicting from the previous slides over there. But in the future, it's a kind of just the end state, target state goal that to achieve the kind of just a continuous ATO. But even the kind of just the standard ATO or the fast track ATO, there are lots of kind of just the gaps that we do see, right? Even within the same organization, same agency. Right, different kind of just the artifacts that they use, different kind of just the assessment and certification process that we observe over there as well. Right, unless you standardize this and automate this, these numbers are kind of just a bit off to me, Alphas.
Interesting. And again, going back to the initial demographics, we're really looking at people who are at the program implementation level. And if they're coming back and saying that, the respondent said we are in fact doing continuous ATO, but at the same time, we've got such a large percentage saying that we're doing things manually, a little bit, needs to be probed in there. Like, how is it that you're achieving continuous ATO while at the same time still using manual spreadsheets? Hassan, you've got some thoughts on this?
Yep, and thanks, Altes. So complementing what Ayhan started as well, and I see definitely a manual process in the ATO, which is kind of delaying and complementing what we saw with other questions. And I would like to take a look at fast track ATO as well. I think fast track ATO is kind of finding a balance between the risk and the continuous monitoring. So if they are doing a fast track ATO to address that, the balance between risk and security or the approval, the legal organization can take a lot of advantage of the pipeline tool generations and output automatically approve that. So there should be more closer to the continuous ATO. And standard ATO is about the manual process, which is all things we have to get away of it. So nothing is technically blocking us if they are using a good DevSecOps and agile practices. That should definitely take an advantage of the tool, advantage of the process and practices, and eliminate the standard ATO process, because otherwise it will be a bottleneck. Bottleneck means like we can go fast, we can build up, we can go quickly, but if you're not able to approve it, it's becoming a dev and hold, as we said at the beginning. We are not doing dev and ops. We are developing and goes to the hold mode, and somebody will take and approve. How long does it take? At the past, it was a 6 month. Now maybe you're going to maybe a 4 days, maybe a week, maybe a 2 months or month. Still is a long time frame.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let me pick up this question that came in. We've been talking about continuous ATO and fast track ATO and so on. But the question is relevant. What actually is continuous ATO, and how do we really get there?
Oh, it's a long question.
I was thinking the same way. How much time do we have?
Right. I think we have to really decide based on our risk posture. So Ayhan can chime in better than me. So there's no any kind of a magic number we can tell you have to make it achieve in a 1 day or 2 days. Depends on the risk, but taking advantage of the full life cycle perspective, taking advantage of automations. If you do a lot of upfront work on ATO perspective, such as platform, probably you are able to get 80% of approval in the platform level, which is your dependencies, and then getting other operational requirements and all those approval early, which is kind of takes time. Once you have done, and then as the organization, you are generating maybe 10% of your code, and then rest all the approved. So if you're able to achieve that upfront work early in the life cycle as an ATO, then you will look at only the tiny piece of the code has been generated on a weekly basis or a sprint base. That will speed up the process. So I will say that should be aligned with your release cycle. If release cycle is a daily, ATO should be a daily. If your release cycle is in weekly, your ATO should be in a weekly basis. We don't want to delay the release. Release is kind of driving your ATO time.
Yep, I agree. And sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, just one thing that I would like to kind of add on top of what Hassan said. The kind of just a problem with the traditional assessments, security assessments. They are point-in-time assessments, right? And you do your assessment, you can kind of just take a look at the raw risk and look at your controls, and kind of just to present your kind of just the residual risk. But what happens after 5 minutes that you have done with your assessment that there's a kind of new vulnerability or new threat emerged, right? So you got to do this kind of just to the thing from scratch, right? Mm-hmm. And again, your question is how we can achieve this. There are kind of just, this is a very long answer, but the short answer is we need to align to the people, process, and technology in such a way that, right, that we can kind of just make the assessments and the kind of just the authorization in a kind of just a much more agile way as well. It's a mindset issue more than technology.
Yeah, interesting. And I think this brings up the data that we're looking at here. When we asked what's the average time to achieve ATO within your organization across the federal, state, and local agencies, and everything from 1 month or less all the way up to 4 or more months. When we look at it, most of them seem to be in the 2 to 3 month sort of time frame. Hassan, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's not surprised me, Altez. Like we see, I am looking for more than 70% are doing 2 months or more. Mm-hmm. So in the context of the current security dilemma, current security postures, more than a month, it's a little long time. If we discover something in our infrastructure or production environment, sometimes days matter. Still, we are chasing the adversaries in the 1 month behind. That's a scary part for me. That goes back, how can we implement? And that's a big discussion, but it's 70%. It's number, but it's not really good. We have to be really upfront, make it less than a month at least, because it becomes a 0-day vulnerabilities for us. Maybe patch is already released somewhere else. If you're not able to patch, if you're not able to upgrade application short time frame, it's too late. That kind of complementing what we get answered about Excel file that keep tracking the controls. And then we saw about the manual process as well. It is the combination of a bottleneck process here. So we are generating data from the pipeline, but still we are struggling to use that data automatically or somehow speed up the process. Still, we have some sort of a manual blocker or a gateways blocking our process to go faster. Let's focus on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, I hope that this has been helpful for folks and they've been able to kind of see, what else, in terms of the survey is providing to us. We do have some additional data. You're welcome to download the report itself, have a look at it. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to the organizing team to help bring us to a land. Thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, Ayhan, Altaz, and Hassan, for an absolutely very informative, fascinating look at this survey results and the whole landscape, really. I learned a lot. We have just about 2 minutes left. I know that there is one final poll question to make sure that everybody gets the most out of this webinar that they can. So I'm going to ask our folks at WorkCast to please push that out to the audience. And while we do that, we'll give everybody just a couple of minutes if there are any final questions. I don't see any that we're going to address. And once again, if there are any last-minute questions, the Security Compass team will follow up with you directly offline. We'll give everybody a minute to answer the final poll question, and then we'll wrap things up. My beagle is quite curious about continuous ATO, as you can probably hear in the background. Picks the most opportune time to make his noises. All right, the second poll is launched. We will gather that information and probably get that out to folks after the case, since we are just about a minute behind. It does seem as if we are out of time for any additional questions. On behalf of our attendees and FC International Signal Media, Ayhan, Altaz, and Hassan, I really again want to offer our thanks for a really, really spot-on discussion and great answers to our questions. And a very big thank you to our attendees for both your kind attention and for submitting those questions. Again, for any that went unanswered, the team at Security Compass will follow up with you directly offline. You can revisit this webinar on demand anytime you like, as well as view the recorded versions of previous Signal Media webinars on AFCEA's Signal Media website at www.afcea.org/signal/webinar. That concludes today's Signal Media webinar. Thanks again for your participation and have a great rest of your day.